again, for those people who may not be familiar, you are familiar with his work in 2018 with two other authors. I don't even know what you would call this, investigative journalism, a social experiment. Like I would call it personally guerrilla warfare, where yourself, Helen Pluckrose, and Peter Boghossian did this, like I said, this clandestine guerrilla warfare attack on academia, where you wrote approximately 20 fake papers, and that using like just woke left jargon, those like hot button topics and keywords, you submitted these fake journals, these papers, excuse me, to real journals, and got almost half of them published. So if people don't know, they certainly know that, and that really, you know, pulled the veil back on academia and exactly what you're talking about. So I mean, that's amazing. That's where I fell in love with your work and really started listening to you and tuning in. So thanks for doing that. I mean, how did you meet Helen and Peter actually? Like, how did you guys start your work together?
I wish this was an exciting story, but the answer is Twitter. It's not an exciting story at all.
Yeah.
Peter and I met on Twitter and started writing together maybe in 2000, either 13 or 14. And then I actually did not like Helen at first on Twitter, and we argued on Twitter around that same time, but we got to be friends maybe a year after that, started writing together maybe closer to 2016. And she had never really worked well with others in her writing, but we had a pretty successful collaboration. So I became like the vertex of a weird V of writing. And when Peter and I, before we did what's now called the Grievance Studies Affair, Peter and I did a trial balloon hoax paper that was called The Conceptual Penis as a Social Construct. Yes. And Helen defended it, but did not participate in that. And so when we started the Grievance Studies Affair a few months later, we asked Helen if she would help us, since she had some background in theory. And we realized that we were going to need at least something to help us decode what we were looking at, because we didn't understand it yet. And that was a really interesting project. I think it's never been more relevant. We're seeing all this, fraud, outright fraud coming out, Harvard and other major universities, especially in these kind of DEI sectors, these presidents, Claudine Gay being the main one, of course. And I just saw that the thing came out today. There's a fourth major, fraud scandal at Harvard in terms of academics. I think we're seeing the very, very, very peak of a very big iceberg. But within that, there is a related problem that's not just plagiarism or data manipulation or whatever else. And that's what the Grievance Studies Affair was showing, which was that even completely by the book scholarship has a tremendous quality problem. If you were to ask me, do you think that they could just be making things up and getting it published? I would tell you they most certainly can, because that's exactly what we did. So I know you can just make stuff up and get it published. In academic journals. I don't know how significant they are, but eventually those things can end up building out schools of thought, and eventually even sub-departments or departments in universities. But the entire DEI phenomenon, which is not exactly a small phenomenon, it's global, it's tens of billions of dollars a year are being dumped into it. It's at every corporation, every institution, every school. That's all built off of this scholarship. That, like I said, I don't think you can even call it scholarship. It's activism posing as scholarship. And it's, I guess, in a legal sense, it's not, it's not property theft. So in a legal sense, it's better than plagiarism. But for all intents and purposes, it's just as bad or worse than the plagiarism. Plagiarism of legitimate scholarship at least reproduces legitimate scholarship. This scholarship is completely illegitimate.